Hi everyone, today I'm going to be showing you how to make one of these beautiful wire wrapped bracelets. And so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using this 18 gauge wire and 22 gauge wire, and also we're going to be using the rondelle beads in size 6mm. So, all right, are we ready? Let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is I've got a new thing of wire here, and I just got these in and they're on the website. So I'm taking my cutters, and these aren't my proper wire cutters, but I'm not sure where mine are, and these will work in a pinch. So here we go. So we just cut the plastic off, and it's just real simple. All right. Okay, so this one is the 18 gauge wire, and when it comes to the gauge, the lower the number, the thicker it is. So that means that the 18 gauge wire is thicker than the 22 gauge wire, and you can kind of see that a little bit here. Okay, and so we're just going to pull it out, and I got my measuring tape here, and you can't quite see it, but so when you measure it out, you just want to kind of straighten it as you go. And for a standard adult size bracelet, you're going to want about 19 inches of wire. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to measure out about 19 inches, and you cut it let's see. Okay, so here we go. So here's 19 inches, about right where my thumb is, and we're just going to cut it right there. All right, we got our nice clean cut there. All right, and don't worry that this end is a little bit wonky, because we're going to end up wrapping the end anyways, so that's all right. Okay, and so we are just going to bring it together and kind of pull it in, and then let's see. So now you see these pliers that I'm using, the ones that look like needle nose, and they have the loops, they're just completely round. So right here where the halfway point is, we're just going to grip our wire in between the pliers, and we're going to bring the wire together, and we're just going to make our little loop. So you see we have a nice little loop there. All right, and then I'm going to come and I'm going to kind of pinch the loop there with my pliers. You don't need to hold it too hard, but so now bring the wires back so that they're not overlapping anymore, but more side by side, and just kind of, I'm using, you see how there's a flat space in between the pliers, so I'm just going to kind of use that to guide it where it needs to be. All right, so there we are. Okay, so you see that's our initial loop, and that's going to be this loop right here on the end of the bracelet. Okay, so now that we have our first loop made, next we're going to pick up our 22 gauge wire, and of course you can experiment with using different kinds of wire. There's more than one way to do this. However, for the wire that's going inside the beads, which in this case is the 18 gauge wire, you don't want it to be too thick, because when you start shaping the bracelet, if it's too thick, since the beads are glass, it can start to bust and break the beads, and also it can make it really hard to bust the beads into place. So if you do decide to go with a thicker wire, just keep that in mind. Okay, so now this one is a little more tightly coiled and springy, as you can see. So when we pull this one out, we're going to need a lot more wire than we did of the part that's going to be actually forming the cuff part of the bracelet. So when we pull this out, because it's so springy, you do want to be really careful and deliberate with how you're holding it and how you're pulling it, and also when you let go, because it's so long. When you let go of the wire and it's springy, you don't want it to spring back and say maybe snap you in the eye or the face. So for this, I like to cut about 55 inches. But I've noticed sometimes you might need a little bit longer, or you might need shorter, depending on how tightly you're wrapping and how exactly you're spacing your beads. I find it's better to go with a little bit longer, so 55 inches has been my safety zone. But you know, you just have to kind of experiment and see what works for you. But I'll also show you, if you don't cut enough, you can just kind of skip maybe say every other bead, and that can help you to be able to, so you don't waste the wire. All right, so now I'm just kind of pulling it out and I'm stretching it out, and so I'm going to stretch it out to 55 inches. And then I'm just going to go ahead and cut it. Okay, so about right here is the 55 inches. So I'm just cutting that like so. And there we go. And obviously you don't want this to get like really kinked up when you're stretching it or when you're working with it. But if it does a little bit, you're going to be wrapping it and it's going to be getting kinked up anyways. So don't stress it too much, but just try to do your best and just try to go ahead and work out any kinks that don't need to be there. And if you need to, you can kind of gently use your pliers to help you as well. All right, so now we have our wire, so let's move on to the next step. Okay, so now that we have cut our 22 gauges of wire, about 55 inches, and we have our bracelet that when folded in half, the wire is about, let's say about 9.5 inches on each side, and we've got our little loop. So what we're going to do, and this part personally for me is a little bit of a pain in the butt, so you can leave a little more extra overlap here to make it easier to wrap. So just put a little bit of overlap on the wire and push it down and just start wrapping that around with your thumb, keeping that, make sure you keep it as close to the loop as possible. You don't really want it to slide down. You want to keep that nice and tight right there close to the loop. Okay, so we got a couple of wraps here now. And so now that we got the wraps, and this part honestly, actually I'm gonna use these pliers for this since these are flat on the inside. So this part for me personally, I find it to be a little bit of a pain in the butt sometimes. So now we're just going to come back and we're going to take that tail of wire and we're just going to start wrapping it back around. All right. All right, so we got our first part wrapped around, and now there's just the teeniest part that's kind of sticking past, and so we're just going to take the pliers and push that in, and now you can see, look at that, it is nice and flush and flat. And you know what? Brushing over it, don't feel a sharp edge, which we're going to come back in the end and wrap over this again anyways, but you always want to make sure you're feeling it so that you don't have any sharp edges. All right, so now we're just going to leave the wire to the side and it's time to start adding our beads. Okay, so for a standard adult size bracelet, and let me just show you how this one fits. Okay. So, and also with the clasp that I made, let's see, there we go. It's pretty easy to get on and off, but okay. So that's about how that one fits, and that's about how loose it is. Personally, for me, I think it fits just right. If you want it more like a cuff, you can take off about 2 or 3 beads. Personally, I wouldn't do it much smaller than that, because when I did some smaller, it was a little bit too fitted for my preference. But see how easily that cuff just came off there? It will not come off easily when you're wearing it, but when you want to take it off and put it on, for me personally, it was very easy. So especially if you have hand problems, coordination problems, that's a huge plus for this kind of hook and clasp. Okay, all right, so the beads. Okay, so you can see that the wire is coming from the under this side and it's going to wrap over that side. So that means we're going to put 30 beads on this side, and we're going to do 29 beads on this side. And I'll show you why when we get started. Okay. So all we're going to do here is just start loading up the beads, and I just pinch them between my fingers. 5 at a time is a good number for me. And we're just going to start sliding. Actually, I'm going to start on the other side first, because I need to adjust that wire. As you see, the beads aren't going to go on the wire if it's not flat. So there's 5 beads on there. And I'm just going to go ahead and take this flat part, and we're just going to straighten that out. All right, just want to make sure that is nice and flat so the beads go on easy, and that should be a lot better now. And also, again, this wire is on my website, but the wire that you're looking for is medium hardness. So that makes it so it's still bendable and you can work with it, but it's not too bendable where it's just going to be like falling out of shape, losing its shape, or just kinking super easy. All right, so we got 10 beads. So got to get to 29 on this side. So, okay. 15. All right, so here's our 29, and for the other side. All right, see how easily the beads go on after I fix that wire? All right, there's the 30. Okay. All right, so now we're just going to straighten the wire a little bit, and we're going to make sure that the side with the 30 beads is the side where the beads start first, if you can see that. And I'm just going to come all the way down here to the end, and I'm going to take the longer piece of wire and just do a quick little loop around the other wire without bending the other wire. And so you see what this is going to, Okay, let's try this again. So I just got all these beads on here, and when I was trying to secure them and show that it was secured, I proved my point and why you should secure the beads. Okay, so let's do this again. So we're going to take this longer end here and we're just going to wrap it around the other wire, but without damaging the wire. And now let's see if that holds. Okay, so this time it's holding. Okay, and so the reason we want to do this is because when you start wrapping this bracelet, it can be real easy to kind of lose track of the end here. And if that's not secured, then the beads can just easily fall off. Okay, but so now we have it secured, and also you don't want to secure it too close to where the beads actually are, because they're going to start spreading as we're wrapping the wire. But anywho, okay, so the side with the extra bead is the side that's going to have the bead starting first. And why this is when the wire starts wrapping, personally, I think it looks better to start wrapping over this bead. And that's just a personal preference, really. You might think it starts looking better to wrap the other way. Okay, so now we're just going to come between these two beads, now between underneath and between the next two, and cross over between the next two, and just keep wrapping around. So if you have done a beaded rope, you might be thinking like, hey, this is kind of similar, and it does feel pretty similar. Okay, so we're just going to try to straighten it up just a little bit here, and honestly, you don't have to worry about it too much, because when you start curving the bracelet into place, if it's a little wonky, a lot of that, in my experience so far, is going to straighten out. But also, the more you do this, the more you'll kind of get the hang of it. So if at first when you're doing these and you feel like it's looking wonkier than it should, it's okay. I did several tester bracelets, as you guys can see here, just kind of practicing and getting the feel for it. Okay, so just keep going around and just keep wrapping, and you don't want it to be loose, obviously, but you don't want it to be super tight when you wrap either. All right, so we're just going to kind of push the beads back down and just periodically straighten the rest of the wire. And here we go. All right, so we're just keep on going down and wrapping, and you see this comes fairly quickly. Overall, it's not a very long project. I want to say it takes me probably about maybe 20 minutes to do a single bracelet, so not that bad really. And I want to say that the cost you'll have in one of these bracelets, if you buy the supplies from me, you'll probably have about maybe $2.50, and that's in US dollar prices, but probably about like $2.50 in a bracelet. Okay, so just keep going, and we're just wrapping away. And let's see, and you can see the wire, you know, it's not really getting in the way, the wire that we're wrapping with. Okay, so we're coming to the end here, and now we just wrap around this last bead. And now I just like to kind of gently pinch the end together here and just wrap the wire around a little bit tighter a couple of times. And now it's just time to do the same thing, but back the other way. So just kind of straighten the bracelet out just a little bit, just however much you can, but don't stress it too much. And now we're just going to come back over this first bead And here we go wrapping. Okay, so now we're coming back, and now you see how it's kind of making that crisscross pattern. And you see how quickly this goes. So you can just hold the wire still in one hand and twist with the other hand, or you can just keep going the same way you did coming up the bracelet and wrap with your hand. Okay, and since I said I would show you how to do this if you didn't have enough wire, like if you're coming back down and you're realizing you don't have enough wire to finish, so instead of going back between every single bead like I am here, and you can even kind of undo it, see like I am here, and see how it kind of straightens fairly back out, not perfect, but good enough to where you won't be able to see it on the bracelet. So what you're going to do is you're just going to skip beads, and you're going to do it every other. So skip a bead and every other, and see how that kind of makes a nice cool little pattern too. So you see the difference between doing it every bead and every other bead. So that's just a really helpful trick if you realize you're running out of wire. But that's not how we're doing this bracelet. So I'm just going to finish it up doing with every single bead. And so just keeping the wire, again, tight, kind of tight fitted, just not too tight. But coming back, you can't really, it's kind of hard to do it too tight on the way back. Let's see, we're almost at the end here. All right, so now that we're at the end, we're just going to go ahead and wrap it a couple times. And we're going to come out. This is about how far I like to come out. And just finish wrapping it. And just guide it with your finger if you can. If you need to guide it with the pliers, you can do that too. So I got it as far as I could with my thumb, but you see there's still that little bit of tail there. So now this is where I kind of come in with the pliers and just guide it into place where it needs to be. All right, so now that is flat, and I'm feeling to see if I can feel that end I just tucked, and I cannot feel it at all, which is the goal. So perfect. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and do the end pieces, and you see how this loop got just a little bit twisty to the side. So now that's a little bit more flat. So I just used, again, the flat rectangle part in these. And now we want to come to the other end, and this is where we are going to make our clasp. Well, it's not so much a clasp as it is a hook, and I'm loving the hook. I have made multiple lengths, and I have found that a little bit shorter, I really like the shorter length, so that's what we're going to go for here. Okay, so what we're going for, since we have about 2 inches we're working with, so we're going to come right here, about the halfway point, and at the thinner part is where we're going to make our loop. Okay, and so we're going to position it so that we're turning to the side. So if you can see that, we're just going to bring it in to the side here. And you see how that lines up almost pretty perfectly, actually, with right here down at the bottom. Let's see, we're just going to close that in and close this in, and remember to do it gently. And we're just going to move this out the way. And it looks like we do need to cut off just this teeny little bit of excess here, making sure not to cut any other metal. So remember, this is kind of a soft metal, so it might cut easily. So just beware of that. Don't cut any other metal. So we got our metal cut, and now we're just going to tuck it in there. And we're going to take our other piece of metal here, and we're just going to wrap it around like so a few times, because we want to make sure that this piece that we just tucked, that's not coming back out at all. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and cut this here, and I'm going to push this over. And so now we're just going to take again that flat part and just keep on guiding this all the way into place. All right, so there we go on that. And now that looks like it needs to be flattened just a little bit. Okay, so that's better. And now we're going to take, again, the end where it's thinner. And so we're going to do this little curve where we kind of curve it back and up just very slightly. And then, so about halfway between where the wire stops here and the end here, and again, where it's thinner, we're just going to start curving that on in. And I'm going to use my thumb to help it get in there. And woohoo, we have our hook made. Okay, so now for the next part, we're just kind of shaping our bracelet into place. All right, and let's see here. And as we're getting into place, it looks like this still needs to be adjusted just a little bit. So luckily it's easy to do because we're using semi-soft metal. And one of my kitties has come to visit me. But all right, so goes in and out easy. Always test to make sure that this part fits this part, and we'll go in and out easily. So now let's test it out, see how it fits, see if it goes in, goes on easily. And normally I have a much easier time getting these on and off. Okay, there we go. All right, so there you have it. We made us a nice hot pink bracelet. And what do y'all think? How does that look, y'all? And then when you want to get it off, it's so easy. You just do that. That's it. That's all the motion that you need to do, and it comes right off. So there you have it. So lots of colors to do these in for the rondelle beads. If you try to make this with any other sizes of wire, please absolutely let me know. And I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial.